Blade, and welcome back to another episode of the Whole Brother Mission podcast. All right, we got a spicy conversation today derived from a recent viral social media post. So, for those that don't know, if you don't have Twitter, I'll just say stay off Twitter because Twitter's a wild place, man. And on Twitter, it would appear as though there is a civil war between black women and black men. It really is just this newfound place that I wish I hadn't discovered, but it has produced some healthy and helpful conversations. Or I actually no, the conversations on Twitter are not healthy, but the ideas they bring up, you can then take it somewhere else and have a healthy conversation. And that's what I'm hoping to do today. So the most recent viral post that I'm speaking of was one from a woman who said that black women are not rehabilitation centers for black men. Black women are not rehabilitation centers for black men. And of course, it went viral, got a lot of attention, support from a lot of women and some men too. But then there was a guy who responded pretty much saying that he didn't feel that perspective was balanced. There's work that needs to go into relationships, and if you have that perspective, then just leave us alone. As black men as a whole, he said, just leave us alone. So a lot of emotions invested in the conversation, but I do think it's a conversation worth having to hear both sides. So, with the whole brother mission being focused on black men specifically, I have two guests today, black men, black fathers, and husbands, to bring their perspective to this. And the goal is to have a healthy dialogue about what's realistic versus what's too high of a perspective or expectation for people. Where's that balance? But also trying to be considerate of women too, because oftentimes women may have these conversations in their own silo, but some men may dismiss it. So I'm choosing purposely to take something that a woman did raise, dignify it, give it additional value, and deem it as worthy of discussion because it is. And then we're gonna balance it out and see where we land. And like I said, that additional perspective of married men is here. So first, I'd like to introduce Aleem Johnson, a longtime friend, and he's going to give you a bit of a history about his relational history, his family makeup, his just so you understand his background as he comes into this conversation. And then second, I'll introduce to you Brent Folks. But Aleem, you go ahead and take it first. Bring the people in on your background, family wise.
All right, thanks for having me, Malik. Like you said, my name is Aleem Johnson. I was born here in the DMV, so I was born in DC, raised in PG County. Just had a typical childhood in some ways. I went to school in Upper Marlboro pretty much all of my life, and I actually met my wife. Even though I'm 35 now, I met my wife in high school. We met at the age of I was 16. So we've been together almost 20 years now. So I started off much younger. And so almost, I would say, pretty much all of my relationship uh, learning and maturity has happened with my wife. So, because we've been together. So as things have gone on, we've been married now for it was 11 years this past November.
Congrats.
And thank you. So yeah, that's pretty much the history. We both started out with neither one of our parents were well, both of our parents are divorced, and um, we weren't raised in. They didn't remarry or anything. We weren't raised in households that had marriages to model after or anything. So we had to go outside to find what we needed to help have a healthy marriage.
Absolutely. Got it. Appreciate that insight, Aleem. And now, Brent, same to you. How did you get to where you are? Where did it start, and where is it now?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Brent, folks. And for myself, it's funny because I just have to say ditto to all the comments that Aleem stated. That a lot of his kind of relational background I share. My wife and I, her name is Tanil, folks. We have been married. July 2nd will be 11 years. also.
Congrats.
We've been together 14. I met my wife in college. So we did meet in high school, but we met at college, best university in the country, NC State University. Go Wolfpack. And But we've been together about 14 years. So she has seen my relationship immaturity as well as my relationship maturity. And so, once again, we've been married 11 years, have three beautiful children, have an 8-year old, a 6-year old, and a 7-month old. And so, definitely, this thing that we call marriage has been a journey, and just truly excited to go into tonight's topic.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. So, perfect segue. Brent, you mentioned relational or relationship immaturity. Now, unfortunately, and if I'm wrong, feel free to push back on me. But my observation is, uh, as far as men, as far as how we perceive relationships, uh, being ready for a relationship, uh, you're ready when you're ready. Pretty much meaning that there's not really any vetting, there's not really any training or preparation. You're ready for a relationship when you see a female that you like. That's pretty much it, and we just take it from there. And most of us, start that process, teens and so on and so forth, and don't really consider what responsibilities are there in relationships or what expectations are there. It's just more so an impulse that leads into other things. Uh, More often than not, we're not reflecting deeply on healthy relationships until much later. But we start the process pretty early. So, if you could both speak to this, Brent, you can go first. Uh, Immature in relationships or immature approaches to relationships, specifically for you. Obviously, you said that you grew over time, but what did that look like for you? What is immaturity in relationships?
Well, immaturity for me started off, as Aleem, alluded to earlier. Growing up, both my parents are divorced as well, and so not really having. And I grew up in a single parent household, just my mom, and so pretty much up until 18, I only got one view, which was my mother. A mother, a black woman who still was scorned and upset with my father. So my view of what relationships look like came from a person who was upset and never dealt with that upsetness. And so my mom really taught me. It was funny because my mom didn't like any of my relationships, so I
Hmm.
never got a healthy look because my mom was her thought was, I'm your one and only. So no one else could get that pedestal. So I never was able to first and foremost get what it means to please a woman. What it means to have a conversation with a woman. All my conversations came from, what I seen, with friends, which was, be disrespectful, throw pickup lines at the wall and see what sticks. And go from there. So my relationship immaturity was kind of get in where you fit in. I'm just a squirrel trying to get a nut, and it wasn't until actually getting with my now wife where I came with that energy early on, to where. And I know we're going to dive into this later where, there's a difference. There's a different energy. There's a different feeling. There's a difference of, man, I actually feel better. I'm a better man. I'm a better person. I treat people differently because of this person. So my relationship immaturity literally went from, man, squirrel trying to get a nut. I'm not getting married until I'm 70, to what it is now.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and I appreciate the transparency because, unfortunately, that is the case for a lot of us. And you know what? I'm getting too far down the road. I'm about to start giving my opinion. Aleem, immaturity in
Yeah.
relationships. What does that look like?
So immaturity in immaturity in relationships for for me was, my parents were actually the opposite. So even though my parents were divorced young, and I stayed with my mother, but my mother was like, I ain't got to deal with him, so I don't care what he do. So my parents had a very, actually, for the most part, positive relationship. Even though my father unfortunately passed when I was 12, my parents divorced when I was 5. So for the most part, the memories that I have, my parents were already divorced, but they had a healthy relationship as far as co-parenting. So I was used to seeing that they both dated and did their own thing. They would never work, clearly never worried about any impact on me. But
Mhm.
so my immaturity was just ignorance, more than anything. It was I was I thought like Brent, but I just didn't have any game. So I never used pickup lines. I was still just like, I was also a squirrel trying to get a nut, but I didn't really know how. And then losing my father at a pivotal age, it kind of made it harder to transition, into manhood, trying to speak with women. And I just never really did. Everybody picked me up. Like even my wife today, we met because she was my sister's best friend. So we were introduced to each other. I didn't go out and find her. Fun fact, I've never met a woman and asked her for a phone number in my life ever. So it just wasn't my thing. I never got to it. I never learned it. I thought it was all of these skills or anything. So, but because of that, I was able to learn just a little bit from other female friends how to kind of, you know, do a relationship at least in a way that they saw. So at least, high school type level stuff. But that was pretty much it. That's all that I had.
Okay. Well, first, shout out to the brothers that don't have game. You know, I want you to feel seen. It's a thing. It's out there. Not everybody fits a certain, and so yeah, I'm glad you
Yeah.
pointed that out because not everybody comes into it with, oh, say this or say that. I mean, you got to figure it out as you go. So, shout out to y'all. But I wanted to consider the impact. So we acknowledge, all right, I might have went into this with a level of immaturity, but oftentimes we don't consider impact until after the damage is done. So I want to help bring others in who may not be considering how their immaturity affects women that they're dealing with, for you to give some perspective, and it can be your personal experience or what you've come to learn years into marriage. But how could or how has your immaturity affected the women you're dealing with? Brent, go ahead, take that.
Um, well, we'll start here. I believe the immaturity, as you stated, man, I think was a lasting impact. There are women that would love to apologize to right now that wouldn't look me in my face at this moment. I think the damage is that I potentially stopped, women in the past from, meeting who God would have for them, because I stayed in the way maybe too long. I think my immaturity has potentially damaged. And the crazy thing about immaturity in relationships, especially with women as we get older that we have not had any no contact with, is you don't even know how bad the damage was. I know what happened to me and me finding the woman of my dreams, but man, I don't even know the impact that another woman has had. How, if that woman has had children, what I may have done that has been potentially, passed down to their child now, the relationship that they're in. So I think with the immaturity comes this level of, in that moment, it's all about me. Everything revolves around me. And I think that's the part that's scary. That's a scary place to be in, because there's no regard for that person then, now, or in the future, which is heavy because you just never know, what's going on mentally with someone. Especially as Black people, we don't seek therapy. We got, and I love what you're doing in normalizing that we never get a chance to deal with what's happening. So I potentially have hurt a lot of people and put them in a position to where not only do they not know how to deal with it, but have potentially, hurt somebody else, because hurt people hurt people. And I added to that equation pretty much.
Absolutely, yeah. So, Aleem, what does immaturity look like for you, and what was the effect on your wife or any previous relationship?
Well, there really wasn't. too many previous relationships. First of all, I didn't have a position to affect anyone in that way. My immature, the only real issue we had with immaturity was having sex real early. Having kids young. So I didn't have a lot of time to be immature. I had kids young, and I want to say that grew me up. I mean, I was already in my mind, like I felt grown. I kind of already knew what I wanted to do with my life at a young age, or at least I kind of felt like I had a good understanding of the world. So it was more so like you don't know what you don't know. But I mean, I've been working, I'm talking like since we've been together. Like, I think when I first met her, I got my first job like shortly thereafter. So, I mean, I was just working on always just doing the little stuff. We were only in high school at first. So it just started out, okay, how soon can we call each other? We got cell phones and stuff like that. I just really wasn't into the game because I couldn't afford to. I didn't have no game. I couldn't afford to be immature or anything like that. I didn't have nothing to prove. So my goal, back then, I'm younger, what's going to lead to sex? And usually that's behaving well in a relationship. So, you know, it really just wasn't that many. We just didn't have that many issues. But also my wife and I, we connected really well. It was just like we established this bond with each other early on, like this kind of love. I know people talk about, different kinds of ways to express this, but I just want, is it love at first sight? Like I can still remember what she looked like, what she had on and everything the day that I met her, like to a T, like still to this day. We still know the date and everything. So I wasn't, I wasn't trying to jeopardize any of that at all, but the issues really came because having the children young, like my wife got pregnant the first time while we were in high school. So that changes a lot of things. It doesn't give you much opportunity. Well, it didn't give me much opportunity to be immature. I'm like, I got to work. We got to worry about feeding the kid and, they just got to grow up. So I was already mature. The only things that I had to deal with, I mean, I was always into like, I wanted to work. That was the whole point. I found her. I mean, that was like, what else is there? Because of the way that things happened and how we felt about each other. And then we went to separate schools. So I never really had anything to prove to anyone, like to guys and stuff like that, to do any kind of immature things. So I was always about that, buying the gifts for Valentine's Day and all of that stuff. Yeah, it was just, the immaturity was the sex, though, honestly.
I'm Olivia Morgan, intake coordinator here at the Whole Brother Mission. I'm here to pass on a little information about how you can join us in helping men in need seek licensed professional counselors nationwide. Number 1, ask. Ask if your employer participates in matching donations. Many employers will match your gift to a nonprofit. We are a 501c3, so all gifts are tax deductible. Number 2, pass. Pass this video as well as our website on to others so that they are aware of our services and our need of support. And number 3, give. If you're able to, please consider giving. The proceeds remove barriers for men seeing a culturally competent mental health professional, and they support our upcoming HBCU book tour. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
That was really what the immaturity was. That was the effect in our relationship. But we've always, I mean, and even our therapist has said, we've always been like on the same page. Any issues we've had have really been things that can easily be solved, that we just have to get, communicated the same way to each other so we both can understand it. But we've always wanted the same thing. We want the same things out of life. We understood each other's sacrifices. So no, it hasn't been perfect, but the immaturity part of the relationships I really didn't have to deal with. Also because, I mean, my father dealt with it. So I got to see it firsthand, from being a kid all the way up. So I had the example of what it's like to play games if necessary or whatever, but I also didn't have the confidence. So I was invested in trying to be a better person for whoever was going to be in a relationship with me.
Brent, you had
If I
something?
can jump in,
Yeah.
Malik, and just say something really quickly. Aleem, you hit on something really, really big in that part that I, really haven't touched on yet, which is that the sex part, the immaturity that comes with that, because the sex outside of marriage, I remember telling my girlfriend, now wife, if you don't give it to me, I am going to get it. So it's either from you or it's going to be from someone else. I told my girlfriend that pretty much in an effort to get sex whenever I wanted. And I remember when we went through marriage counseling, what broke me down was when she said, Brent, when you put me in a position to where you wanted me to have sex with you when I didn't even want it, you were indirectly raping me. Man, I don't know the pain that I felt at a marriage counseling session to hear when I have to do something with my body that I didn't want. It didn't matter that you were my boyfriend at the time, you were indirectly raping me. And so I think the immaturity with sex, as men, we don't even realize that we're doing that when we are forcing something upon somebody who may not want it, even though they're not saying anything. But that comment truly impacted me in a way that I don't. No man should ever. Every man needs to hear that, because I promise you, you'll be a better person whenever you hear the wrong, in some of the things that we do as men.
Yeah. Uh, Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a real piece to this discussion. And I was wondering, like, well, I imagine sex is going to come up at some point, just, logically speaking. But I was wondering how we would get to it. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because where I was headed was a story from high school. This was my experience growing up, and over time, I realized, similar to you, Aleem, because of the context that I was given for relationships and women, I realized that I think through it differently than the average guy.
Hmm.
In high school, once again from the same area as Aleem, DMV, uh, a lot of the other, I went to a high school that was a basketball high school. A lot of NBA players passed through there. Um, and not me though. Yeah, not me. But one of the things I remember from high school was it was a game kind of that guys played where it was pretty much if any time any guy demonstrated some level of emotion, care, desire for a real relationship, commitment, only sleeping with one female, anything like that a guy demonstrated, we would say, I wasn't a part of it, but the saying would go, "Oh, you saving? You're trying to save her."
Mhm.
Um, and it was a shame thing. Like, nah, you're not supposed to do that, because the understanding is you're not supposed to expose yourself emotionally with these females. You're not supposed to uh, be monogamous. You're not supposed to actually care. You're just supposed to. The understanding is play a role, get sex out of it, and then keep it moving. Be stone faced, cold about it. Don't get too attached. And I wondered, where did that come from, because that wasn't my upbringing. Uh, Women weren't looked at as something to, or relationships weren't looked at as something to protect yourself from, but something that's a benefit that you invest in. Um, and I think the impact of kind of looking at women as just kind of objects for sex has had interesting impacts as it relates to how that's played out over the years. So Aleem and I have talked about this before, but I I really wonder how far does this go, and I want to hear you guys' thoughts on this. I'm just talking out loud, but I said in a previous video that when you only look at women for that particular sexual release, of course, it dehumanizes them because you're removing all the other aspects of who they are. But the other thing that I don't think a lot of us straight men are thinking through is this idea of being straight but hating women. Um, because the approach was, don't connect to her on a personal level. It's just physical. So it's like, yeah, we're in a relationship, but I'm going to keep you at arm's length, and it's just going to be a physical thing. And what that has morphed into today, I talk about the Twitter wars about relationships. There's constantly this back and forth about uh, it's a culture now of bashing women, and I know having listened to the Earth, Wind, and Fire and Isley Brothers verses, things have changed. You know, you got these delicate love songs being written, and now you got guys on Twitter arguing about not paying for the first date. I'm the prize as the man, and women need to be humbled. It's just an interesting change of pace, to say the least. Uh,
Yeah.
and I wonder, have we created a monster with that mindset of just looking at women from a sexual perspective? Because I do think that what I see now, unfortunately, is a dynamic where guys would actually rather spend time with their homeboys, and then when nature calls, go relieve yourself in her, and then get back to living your life. So she becomes more of a receptacle than an actual partner. And I think we've kind of created that norm for so long by normalizing the idea of only dealing with a person for a sexual purpose. Relationships, I think, have been brought down to the level of prostitution. And who can even measure the impact that has had on women? But I know I just said a lot. Thoughts? Anybody?
Um, Go ahead, bro.
Okay, so here's my thoughts on that because, and Malik, you've seen it where, especially the part about where men hate women. I think the thing is um, it's not anything new. Just because they used to get married, women were married off. I mean, throughout history, women have never been treated as people, and studies show that even women look at other women as sexual objects. The problem is with society valuing women as people. The reason I was able to, even though once I started having relationships, because I only had like two or three girlfriends before I met my wife. Um,
Okay,
but
so you have some game.
I gotta no, they came to me too. They
They
came
asked
to
for
me
your
too.
number.
Yes, yes. So, but no, the advantage of not having the game and being nervous, I just started to develop friendships with young ladies, or girls. We were kids then, but um, and because of that, and I didn't have no game. I wasn't talking. I would have regular conversations. Plus, I grew up, even though, I grew up with like, I had girl cousins and stuff like that. So it was very normal to have more conversations and having conversations with women where I've noticed a lot of men, and I've even seen this in older men, you can tell that they never talked to a woman because they'll say things and they'll say, yeah, that's what women like. Yeah. And you'll hear it and you're like, really? This is what you think, but this is much more common because it's just spread down. They'll say a man will tell another man, "Hey, this is what women like," and then they'll just carry it on like that. They forget asking the women or anything. The songs, as far as the verses were concerned, it was just they just made them sound better. They was all still nasty too. So just because we saying it different now, I don't think that part has changed, but I do think it has gotten more exposure and social media has given a lot of things much more exposure. But the fact that now, I mean, you could see it as like, well, back in the day, what would happen? Instead of just running back and forth to the women and not doing anything, what would happen? You'd be married, but your granddaddy might have a family across town or something like that. That's what I mean. The stuff isn't new, just social media and the way that society has moved allows us to do things slightly differently. They're like, oh, I don't have to get married to do this. I can just go ahead and do all of these things. And so what ends up happening, a lot of men have pride and they actually look up to their peers. They have a lot to prove. And so a lot of that has to do with the falsehoods that they hear about women. So sometimes it's just something to prove. Other times it's like, okay, well, I've heard that. So that's just what it is. Some people may see it as them being soft, and that's not the kind of person that they want to be. Or they've been a lot of things that Malik, I know that you may touch on it slightly, but we don't talk about a lot how many men get molested as kids. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and they get molested by women. You know, these things happen. So there's so many different angles that I think sometimes we may miss out on, and it only shows itself in how they respond with these relationships and just going out and doing all of these crazy things. You know, you have to say, okay, there must be something within that history to say, okay, what would make a person choose to do something so reckless? You know, we see it all the time. We see celebrities just because you get money, and even though you learn, they may still, they're going off and having kids and STDs and everything. And you would think at a certain level that stuff would change, but it doesn't. It's about the programming and what they see. But it's all a choice. You know, we peer. I'm still adjusting to being an adult and understanding that adults succumb to peer pressure. You know, I really didn't understand how deep it was because, in school they always told us you didn't want to do that. You didn't want to succumb to peer pressure, but that's just how a lot of it is. Like literally all they may say, "Oh, you want to be with your girl?" Okay, that's it. Somebody saying something and raising their voice that makes you change your mind.
Mm-hmm.
But this is, I mean, but what else do you do when in reality, because of the relationship that maybe people have built, that they value what someone says, but they don't know how to say it in a way that's healthy or conducive. So they'll just go along with it, like, all right, well, no, of course they'll dog her out, or or do whatever. Also, too many men see themselves as higher, more important than they really are. The vast majority, and so it creates a superiority complex that a lot of them feel like women aren't even on their level, like mentally or anything, and that's how they see women. And considering I've never seen women like that, I don't know how to explain that. But it's just really interesting to see still in this day and age, which is why sexual harassment is so prevalent and stuff. They can't understand. Why can't I say this to them? Why can't I look at them, watch it? You know, like all of that. I don't know how you could go all that time, maybe have mother, sister, wife, kids, whatever, and they're still men. They just don't value women.
Mm-hmm.
My
Yeah,
my
there's
brother,
a couple of things. One, I'll bring it right to you, Brent. But one thing I just
cool.
wanted to throw out there is you hit on a lot of things, and we don't even have the time, man. But uh, in terms of the music specifically, I know that music has been nasty for a while. So it's not even that. What I was getting at is it has become normal to talk crap about women. Like there used to be this thing of I want to put my best foot forward so that they look at me a certain way, but now that's out the window too. And it's like you can lead with talking down on women, and that still will draw them, and that's an unfortunate impact too. So I'm saying that unfortunately that has changed, and I wonder if this kind of negative view, because I think we've seen it as not a negative because, well, of course I like to have sex with women, so of course I like women. But when you get outside of sex and you consider all these other categories, you begin to see, oh, you just like you want a slave or a helper, like, and not even in the biblical sense, but just do this when I tell you to do it.
An
When
assistant.
people start to talk about what they want, and I wonder what has caused that. I would argue some of it is in the music and in hip hop culture. um, I'd say some guys have learned from their alcoholic uncle about, yeah, this is how these women act. That's where they learn from, a guy that has dysfunctional thinking. But also, you hit on the uh, childhood sexual abuse thing. That I think is one that doesn't get talked about enough. That a lot of, I know personally, young black boys are taken advantage of by grown black women, and that is their first introduction to sex. And we can, I can't get into this here, but from a psychological perspective, the impact is crazy as far as how he then views women long term. And I would, from a
Right.
very simple perspective, I would say if women are your abuser, if a woman was your abuser, you still go through life as a straight male, but how you interact with them definitely leans more toward projecting that abuse that you received. So it affects your view of women tremendously. It's not a badge of honor. I think it takes away more so. But Brent, go ahead.
Yeah, what I was going to say is my brother Aleem was very professional. I'm gonna get slightly ratchet for a second
All right.
before I come to professional. I think, as we grew up, everyone where you grew up at, in your community, in your, whether you're from the hood, whether you're from the projects, whether you're from the country, there was always a neighborhood freak, and
Yeah.
everyone knew who the neighborhood freak was. And so when it came down as a man or as a boy, as an adolescent, it was, why would I put in the work where there are this neighborhood freak or that neighborhood freak that's going to do it without me putting in any work? And so what happens is there's this sad reality that, that definitely messed me up when I was growing up, which became this reality of, man, the women want sex just as much as I do. And for me, they want, not only does a woman want sex just as much as I do, but it's me and four of my friends, and it's one of her, and this person wants all five of us, which at that time it's a badge of honor. It's a conversation. Literally, I would do immature things in the past just so I could have a story to tell friends.
Yeah.
Right. And so, as you said, Malik, it put me in a position to where women were, women for me were pretty much comic books. It was something that I could store, that I could store away, that I could read later, that I could tell somebody later. And not realizing that, man, I'm going through life with this thought that, man, women want sex just as much as I do. So they're not tripping on me asking, not putting work in, but I'm not realizing what trauma that girl has been through, right? I think, having a daughter, now I had two sons first, but having a daughter puts everything in perspective as a dad, because you think about everything now, and now it's like, man, everything that I've done to females in the past, and I want to smack any boy that looks at my daughter and potentially wants to
Yeah.
try this. I think just like you said, when we look at women, we see this receptacle, but we don't look at that woman as, man, this is somebody's daughter. This is somebody's mother. This is somebody's sister. This is somebody's, person that, that they pray with.
That they value.
We
Yeah.
don't, and so that's the, that's the immaturity as men that we do sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And I hate that it's been that way, but my hope is that we can just inspire a generation of guys that have a newfound perspective on masculinity. This isn't, uh, you know, being not forthcoming about the reality of sex drive and the desire for sex and all that. I don't think that's the bad thing. The bad thing is the compromises we're willing to make to get sex. So it's um, like I don't even want to get too far into this, but there's a popular YouTube personality who is getting a lot of traction of following from black men, and a lot of what he talks about paints women as more so a resource to be used rather than a human partner to invest in. But a lot of guys are supporting it, and I think they're supporting the content because it kind of is critical of women. But there are several guys who have had negative experiences with women that they haven't yet resolved. So they then like seeing somebody else hold the women accountable for the personal issues they have. And I'm all for accountability, but there's a better way to go about it. So I do want to always try to teach in having these conversations so that other people don't make the same mistakes. So we can close with this. You're obviously speaking to the public, but both of you are into your marriages a different amount of years. But who you are now, take a moment to speak to your teenage self. You're speaking to your teenage self. but also other younger guys listening, give them some guidance on how to deal with women in that phase of life to not repeat some negative cycles. Aleem, you can take it first.
Okay, well, I can speak. I don't know about the speaking to myself part, but looking back, I mean, everything requires growth. It required growth. So, I mean, I would say to continue on what you're doing, maybe slow down on having kids, but uh,
That's a good
you
point.
know, just
Yeah.
then on one, yeah, that have kids later in life when you're established, and because that having kids is its own strain on a relationship. Having kids is not an easy thing. A lot of people, I've seen relationships die because of the two people having children. I've seen perfect relationships completely die once they had a child. Um, I was fortunate to not go through that, but I'm going to say that for the most part, any young man that's looking for a way, or just trying to um, treat women better, and just trying to live their normal life, and which I understand includes a sex drive and all of these things, right? Is to remember that women are people. I think starting there, I think that's the starting point. Like, we have to start there, bare bones. Women are people. Treat women like people. Because I think one of the biggest misadvantages that men have is since they don't see women as people, they have much there's a much less chance of them having female friends outside of family, meaning they don't get to talk to any other women, so they don't really get much perspective because they only see women a certain way. So it truly limits how much a man can connect with another woman if you're not conversing with anyone throughout most of your life, if you're only seeing them as this vessel to only have sex with. So starting out with treating women as people, and then dealing with past hurts. I still can't believe that I could say this, that I've met grown men that said, yeah, they were hurt in high school, and they've been
Mm-hmm.
on the
Been
road ever
savage
since.
ever
And it's
since. Yep.
and it's
Mhm.
20 years later, 30 years later. They so I don't ignore the emotions. Men have we're people, we're human, we all have emotions. Most men just think it's manly to uh stuff it in, but that doesn't mean you don't have the emotion. So work on it. And I've had lots of therapy. Those that need therapy, I wholeheartedly suggest it. Therapy, reading books. It's just, things take time. There's no way that someone can just give you this quick shortcut, or even in this single podcast to help. It takes work. So, but it's so much better on the other side. Like, usually these people end up miserable, doing all of these things. You're, a lot of the times you're not happy. There's only certain people that can really, if you don't deal with your stuff, how can you really be happy with anyone else if you're not even happy with yourself? So just continue to view women as people, work on yourself, seek therapy, and treat women like people instead of sexual objects, and you'll have an easier time even in relationships.
Got it. Well said. Brent, what you got?
I'm a huge fan of Tony Evans, and Tony Evans, he said something, man, that really changed my perspective. And um, if I was a child, or a boy or a teenager, or somebody coming into adulthood, starting with this is huge. Tony Evans says, you know, you know, hey, when you're a better man, better men raise better families. Better families create better communities. Better communities create better cities. Better cities create better states. Better states create better countries. Better countries create a better world. But in order to be a better world, we got to have better countries. In order to have better countries, we got to have better states. In order to have better states, we got to have better cities. In order to have better cities, we got to have better communities. In order to have better communities, we got to have better families. And in order to have a better family, we got to have a better man. It all starts with us. So every answer starts with one individual, and that's us as a man, that we have to be better. We have to be accountable. We have to understand that to our actions, there's collateral damage. That 15 minutes, for some men, 5 minutes, and for some other men, 1 minute of pleasure can literally lead to years of pain, strife, and frustration. And so, number one, knowing that in order for us to have a better world, when it all boils down, it really boils down to men being better, period. Secondly, that we're never going to have enough money. You know, I talk to guys all the time that say, man, I want to get married, man. I think this is the one, but man, I just don't have the funds. And I ask them, I say, well, great, how much money you need to get married? They would say, well, I don't know. I'm like, well, how do you know you don't have enough if you don't even know what it takes? And I tell people all the time, I got married for $80. That was $60 for the marriage license, $20 to the clerk of court. So you're never going to have enough money. So make the decision anyway, because being a better man means making a decision to be accountable, and grabbing someone that you feel is going to make you a better person that you want to do life with. And then number three, as Aleem said, our women, are so crucial to our everyday aspect, and just to know that we have this opportunity to be a better world, to be a better nation. And the first step to being a better nation is to treat someone that looks like you with respect. And so when it all boils down, treat people with respect, treat women with respect, all colors, all nations, all creeds, because when you do that, good things happen. And so I would keep it short, simple, and just like that.
Definitely. I appreciate you both for your contributions. I think it's been a helpful conversation. I'll throw my 2 cents in. I know, once again, this always steps on toes, but I think it needs to be said. Honestly, in my assessment, just seeing the impact of a spotted relational history on individuals, families, and what that turns into, repeating the cycle, kind of how you mentioned, Brent. I'm of the persuasion. Now, I'm not saying this is everybody, but I think a helpful rule of thumb is to kind of flip on its head how we view dating in those earlier years. I would just recommend holding off. That's me. But I think that would save people a lot of heartache and damage for additional people, because I've yet to see, and I'm talking about sex specifically, I've yet to see someone say, I'm really glad I started having sex at 14. It was a great experience. It's made me really whole, and I just think highly of myself, and now it's made me I've yet to see it have that result. It typically has the opposite effect. So I think it'd be helpful to reconsider the whole dating sex thing that early. Uh, Lastly, because it's creating a unrealistic dynamic for relationships. That phase that you're in as a 15-year-old is never going to happen again. No romantic relationship is going to be sustained in a space where you have high level of freedom and low level of responsibility as a 15-year-old. That's never going to happen again. It's going to just come with more responsibility later, more requirements. So you're kind of building relationships in this fictitious environment that's never going to exist again as you continue to get older. Once you're an adult, you stay an adult the rest of your life. So that's my thoughts on it, but everybody has their own approach to that. But once again, thank you guys for joining me. I'm Maliek Blade, and this has been another episode of the Whole Brother Mission podcast.